Bienvenue à tous. Welcome to Business Morning here on France 24. Let's start with the world's main business stories in the main world business press. American International Group sends fresh tremors to the market, says the UK's Financial Times. Shares in the world's largest insurer fell by over 11% on Monday after the group raised its subprime loss estimates for October and November from about $1 billion to nearly $5 billion. And another market rout, the Wall Street Journal reports that Indian energy group Reliance Power dropped 17% on its first day of trading, exacerbating India's stock market downturn. The Reliance IPO was supposed to be the biggest and most hyped this year, and nobody expected a listing below the issue price. As Ukrainian President Viktor Yushchenko heads to Moscow for a meeting with President Vladimir Putin, Gazprom has extended its deadline to 6 p.m. Moscow time this evening for Kiev to pay off its debts or face a cut in gas supplies. The Russian business daily Kommersant says the issue will be high on the agenda of the presidential. Gazprom has assured EU supplies won't be affected. Now, the Eurozone partners met in Brussels yesterday, and the recurrent issue of the French budget deficit was at the top of the agenda again. France was criticised for its deficit level and was asked to meet a 2010 target for balancing its budget. President Nicolas Sarkozy had previously warned that this might not be possible.
Get your act together. That was the message unanimously delivered to France by Eurozone finance ministers in Brussels on Monday.
We agreed on a commitment in Berlin in April last year that in particular the great member states should be compelled themselves to the commitment to reach the midterm objectives latest in 2010. And I think that is the guidance for our discussion.
French Finance Minister Christine Lagarde, however, maintained that France will find it very difficult to keep its promise to balance its budget by 2010 due to the slowing of economic growth. This as Eurogroup President Jean-Claude Juncker said that the ministers would evaluate whether the poor economic climate made it tougher to achieve that goal. But he was also quick to stress that the Eurozone economy was not entering bad times despite a U.S. slowdown. Other Eurozone countries, which have strived to consolidate public finances, want to see France play by the rules. But shedding the dunce cap might prove a challenge for President Nicolas Sarkozy, who had asked that the original 2010 deadline be pushed back by 2 years when he was elected. The French president's ratings are in a slump, in part due to his failure to make good on an election pledge to boost spending power, and balancing the deficit seems low on his list of priorities.
Taking his messages there, as you'd imagine. Now, France may be in the EU hot seat for its budgetary lapses, but as our business editor Douglas Herbert now here to tell us, La Belle France is not alone. So, Doug, other Europeans apparently lagging also on the fiscal front.
Indeed, Mark. We have a lot of budgetary layabouts out there. Italy has been singled out for censure by the EU as well. Unlike France, however, Italy has said, EU, we shall tighten our fiscal belts in 2008. They have pledged to get their budget deficit down to about 2.3%. And the EU acknowledged this and said, very good, Italy, we'll be watching. So for now, the EU watchdogs have backed off on Italy. What about Portugal? As recently as 2005, it was running a whopping deficit of about 5%. That's red alert level for the EU watchdogs. They were all over Portugal, ready to pounce, ready to apply sanctions. Portugal now is back in the EU good column. It's also vowing to rein in its deficit well within the EU 3% ceiling this year. EU's taken a stern line with the UK. Sorry to say, Mark. Yes, the UK. It says that its reduction, quote, appears insufficient and should be strengthened. Its deficit in the UK expected to rise to that ceiling level, the limit of 3% this year.
Typically,
Germany,
UK doing exactly what they wish they
exactly.
was, I suppose, yeah.
Germany, the only one, the knight in shining armor, the EU said, clapped its hands. Remarkable budgetary consolidation, Germany. Good
Okay,
on you.
so much for the fiscal miscreants, I suppose you could say. But what can the EU actually do to enforce good behavior, as you put it?
Very little. It also depends who the target is. The big countries France and Germany tend to get away with everything. They have broken the laws, the fiscal laws, left and right in the past. No sanctions applied. Nothing's happened. The little countries, Portugal and Greece, they've actually had proceedings launched against them in the past. The EU basically knows it has the power. They don't have as much sway on the European Council of Ministers where the votes are, Portugal and Greece. So now, though, they seem to be doing okay, back in the good column. But really, the EU so far has never applied sanctions. They can't do it. They have very little power when push comes to shove.
The tail wagging the fiscal dog.
Exactly, Mark.
Absolutely phenomenal that so much fuss is made, but
A Rottweiler
with so
that.
little power, toothless. There you go. Doug, thank you for that explanation there, clarifying issues as ever. Douglas Herbert, our business editor. Of course, you can see his blog on France24.com. Now then, Standard & Poor's has just put out a hard-hitting report. Wallop. According to the ratings firm, world stock markets lost, get this, $5.2 trillion. How many zeros, Doug? In January, amid fears of a global economic slowdown brought on by the subprime crisis. The most troubled markets are Turkey, Russia, China and India, which have lost between 16% and 23%. In Europe, the Paris market was the most deeply affected, with a 12.3% drop. Now, if signs of a US recession are growing, that doesn't prevent George W. Bush, the president himself, from keeping the faith. The US president thinks the economy is structurally sound for the long term and that the stimulus package approved by Congress promises to lift uncertainties in the short term.
This report indicates that our economy is structurally sound for the long term and that we're dealing with uncertainties in the short term. And therefore, what should we do about it? Well, I'm so pleased that the Congress and the administration work closely together to pass a robust pro-growth package to deal with the uncertainties.
President George W. Bush there. Well, now then, it's time for our daily update of business news in Asia with our Beijing correspondent, Henry Morton. It seems that mining firm Rio Tinto has been given more ammunition to fight off BHP Billiton's advances.
Yes, Rio Tinto, the subject of a $132 billion hostile bid from BHP Billiton last week, is expected to report a near 10% increase in second-half profits thanks to record iron ore production and its acquisition of Alcan. Analysts are looking for net income to climb to around $4 billion from $3.64 billion the year before. The increase would support Rio as it tries to stay independent and contrasts heavily with BHP, who saw an unexpected 2.4% drop in profit last week. Rio scheduled to publish earnings before market open in London on Wednesday. Staying with commodities, and Nippon Steel is reportedly planning to raise the price of sheet and plate steel by between 10 and 20% in April because of soaring raw material prices. If the increase is followed by competitors, it could raise costs for customers by more than $9 billion and push Nippon Steels to their highest since the 1990s. We end in South Korea, where corporation tax looks set to fall when the president-elect takes office in 2 weeks' time. Lee Myung-bak's transition committee has indicated the incoming government would like to see corporate income tax fall from 25% to 20% over the next 5 years to give a much-needed boost to the ailing economy.
Henry Morton there in Beijing. Now then, let's go on to the world stock markets. Quick look at the figures before we leave you. US shares bouncing higher on Monday, the Dow rising something like 0.48%. The Nasdaq, as you can see, and the S&P, all those nice green triangles for you. And let's take a quick squint at where the Nikkei is at in Tokyo at present. Those then are the main stories, business-wise. You're watching France 24. Stay with us.